The thing about betrayal is that it usually comes disguised as good news. Sometimes it arrives in a cheerful voicemail, delivered with the kind of enthusiasm that makes your stomach drop before your brain even processes the words. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I'm Cynthia, and I'd been deployed in Afghanistan for 8 months when my younger brother Marcus called with what he described as incredible news. I was sitting in my bunk at Forward Operating Base Chapman, finally getting some downtime after a brutal week of convoy escorts, when I saw his missed call notification. The 2018 Dodge Challenger SRT Hellcat sitting in my garage back in Phoenix wasn't just a car. It was 3 years of double shifts at the auto parts store, skipped meals, and sleeping on my friend's couch to save every possible dollar. Plum crazy purple with black racing stripes, 707 horsepower of pure American muscle. I'd spent 2 years researching every option, visiting dealerships, and negotiating until I found the perfect one. The day I drove it off the lot was the proudest moment of my life up to that point. Before shipping out, I'd been meticulous about preparations. The Challenger was stored in my locked garage, covered with a premium car cover, battery tender connected, insurance maintained. I'd given Marcus a spare key only for emergencies, if there was a fire, flood, or some other catastrophe that required moving it. We'd gone over this explicitly. The car was my baby, my reward for all those years of grinding, my motivation to make it home safe. Marcus had seemed reliable enough. At 25, he was 3 years younger than me, but had always been the charming one, the smooth talker who could convince anyone of anything. He worked part-time at a local gym and lived with our parents, always talking about his next big opportunity, his next scheme to make it rich. I'd helped him out financially more times than I could count, but he was family. Family helps family, right? The voicemail was classic Marcus. Upbeat, excited, talking fast like he always did when he was trying to sell someone on something. Sin, oh my God, you're not going to believe what happened. Call me back as soon as you get this. I have amazing news about your car situation. You're going to thank me for this, I promise. This is going to change everything for you. Car situation? What car situation? My hands were shaking as I dialed his number, the satellite connection crackling with that familiar delay that made overseas calls feel like talking to a ghost. Cynthia, Marcus answered on the first ring, his voice bright with artificial enthusiasm. Perfect timing. I was just thinking about you. What did you mean by car situation? I cut straight to the point. What's going on with my Challenger? Oh, that's what I wanted to tell you. You know how you've been stressed about money, right? With the deployment and everything? Well, I solved your problem. My blood pressure spiked. What problem? What are you talking about? The insurance payments, the registration, all that stuff. It's been sitting there eating money for months. So I talked to Jimmy Rodriguez down at Desert Sun Motors, and he made us an incredible offer. The world seemed to tilt. Made us an offer for what? Your car. He gave us $68,000 for it, cash. Can you believe that? I mean, I know you paid more, but with depreciation and everything, that's actually a really good deal. Plus, think about all the money you'll save on insurance and… You sold my car. The words came out flat, emotionless. Around me, the noise of the base, generators humming, helicopters in the distance, soldiers talking, faded to a dull roar. I helped you liquidate an asset that was just sitting there depreciating. You should be thanking me. $68,000, Sin. That's a lot of money. You sold my car while I'm deployed. I repeated it because my brain couldn't quite process what I was hearing. Look, I know you're probably a little shocked, but when you think about it rationally, where's the money? What? The $68,000, where is it? There was a pause, just long enough to make my heart sink further. Well, see, that's the thing. Jimmy couldn't just write a check that big, so he gave it to me in cash, but then I had this opportunity come up. Marcus. There's this crypto investment that Derek told me about, and the returns are insane. Like, we're talking about turning $68,000 into $200,000 in 6 months, maybe more. I'm talking about life-changing money here. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of my helmet, the scratchy fabric of my uniform, the dry heat that never seemed to leave this place. You gambled away the money from my car. It's not gambling, it's investing, and it's going to pay off huge. You'll see. By the time you get back, we'll have enough money to buy you 2 Challengers, maybe 3. How much is left? Another pause, longer this time. Well, the crypto market has been a little volatile lately. How much, Marcus? Look, it's going to come back. Derek says this is just a temporary dip. The technology behind this coin is revolutionary. We just need to be patient. How much is left of my $68,000? Well, it's hard to say exactly because the market fluctuates, but probably around 12,000, maybe 13 on a good day. I stood up abruptly, my bunk creaking in the sudden silence of my corner of the tent. Around me, other soldiers were reading, playing cards, video chatting with family back home. Normal deployed life continued while my world collapsed. You stole my car and lost my money on cryptocurrency. I didn't steal anything. I'm trying to help you build wealth. And it's not lost, it's just temporarily down. This is how investing works, Sen. You have to think long-term. I'm going to call you back. Wait, don't hang up. Let me explain the technical analysis Derek showed me. This coin has incredible potential. I hung up and sat back down on my bunk, staring at my phone. Around me, the base hummed with its usual activity, but I felt completely disconnected from it all. My beautiful Challenger, the car I'd worked so hard for, the symbol of everything I'd achieved through discipline and sacrifice, was gone. Sold by my own brother to fund his latest get-rich-quick scheme. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. I know you're upset, but trust me on this. Family helps family, and I'm helping you build real wealth here. The old way of thinking about money is dead. I thought about the hours I'd spent detailing that car, the way the engine sounded when I opened it up on empty desert highways, the pride I felt every time someone complimented it. I thought about the careful budgeting, the overtime shifts, the sacrifices I'd made to afford something that beautiful and powerful. Then I thought about Jimmy Rodriguez at Desert Sun Motors. I bought the car from him 3 years ago. An honest guy, family business, had treated me fairly during the purchase. He probably had no idea Marcus wasn't authorized to sell it. But here's the thing Marcus didn't know about me, the thing he'd never bothered to learn despite us growing up in the same house, despite all the times I'd helped him out of financial trouble, despite all the conversations we'd had about my career plans. I hadn't joined the Army just for the steady paycheck and the benefits. I joined because my long-term plan required military experience, leadership training, and the GI Bill. What Marcus didn't know, what nobody in my family knew except my mentor from high school, Mrs. Patricia Chen, was that I'd been accepted to the Wharton School of Business after my deployment. What he really didn't know was that Mrs. Chen had become more than just a mentor over the years. She'd become a business partner. And what Marcus definitely didn't know was that 6 months ago, Mrs. Chen and I had quietly purchased a controlling interest in Desert Sun Motors through a holding company. Jimmy Rodriguez was planning to retire, his kids weren't interested in the car business, and he'd been looking for the right buyers who would treat his employees well and maintain his reputation for honest dealing. Mrs. Chen had the capital, I had the automotive knowledge and the long-term vision, and Jimmy had the established business and customer base. It was supposed to be my surprise when I returned from deployment, my transition from soldier to business owner, my path to real financial independence. Marcus had just sold my car to a dealership I secretly owned, then gambled away the proceeds on cryptocurrency. I opened my laptop and logged into the secure email account I used for business communications with Mrs. Chen. The subject line was simple: Emergency, need full transaction records for recent Challenger sale. As I typed, explaining the situation in clinical, military-precise language, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was something much more dangerous. I was focused. Marcus wanted to talk about building wealth and thinking long-term. Perfect. It was time he learned what those concepts actually meant. And it was time he discovered that family helping family worked both ways, including helping family members learn some very expensive lessons about trust, consequences, and the difference between stealing and investing. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. Also, I might have told a few people about the crypto thing and they want in. Can you send more money? This is our chance to really make it big. I smiled for the first time since getting his call. Oh, Marcus, you have no idea what you've just walked into, but you're about to find out. Mrs. Chen's response came within 2 hours, despite the time difference. Patricia had always been efficient, but the speed of her reply and the attached documents told me she understood the gravity of the situation. The transaction records painted a picture that made my jaw clench. Marcus hadn't just walked into Desert Sun Motors and made a simple sale. He'd orchestrated an elaborate performance, complete with forged power of attorney documents and a sob story about his deployed sister needing emergency funds for medical expenses. According to Jimmy Rodriguez's detailed notes, Marcus had shown up wearing a military t-shirt, one of mine that I'd left at our parents' house, and spinning a tale about how I'd been injured in an IED explosion and needed immediate cash for specialized treatment not covered by military insurance. He'd produced what looked like official documents, giving him authority to liquidate my assets, complete with notarized signatures and military letterhead. The forgery was sophisticated enough to fool Jimmy, who'd wanted to help a military family in crisis. But Patricia's forensic accountant had already identified at least 6 federal crimes in the documentation, from wire fraud to identity theft to forgery of government documents. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the social media trail Patricia's assistant had compiled. Screenshots from Marcus's Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok accounts over the past 3 months painted a picture of escalating delusion and grandiosity that made my stomach turn. There was Marcus at the casino, flashing rolls of cash with captions like, "When you know how to work the system," and "Built different." Photos of him at expensive restaurants, bottle service at nightclubs, designer clothes with tags still attached. A particularly nauseating video of him giving investment advice to his followers. You have to think bigger than a job, bigger than normal. I'm about to turn my sister's old car into a fortune. He'd been treating my car sale like his personal lottery win, and worse, he'd been documenting every step of blowing through the money while I was dodging mortar attacks in Afghanistan. The cryptocurrency investment he'd mentioned was even more pathetic than I'd imagined. According to the blockchain records Patricia had obtained, Marcus had fallen for a classic pump-and-dump scheme involving a coin called Moon Diamond. The revolutionary technology was copied code from existing cryptocurrencies. The development team was entirely fictional, and the whole operation had collapsed within 6 weeks of launch. Derek Martinez, the friend who'd convinced Marcus to invest, had apparently lost his own money in the same scam before disappearing entirely. Marcus had been calling and texting Derek for weeks, getting no response, but still posting on social media about riding out the dip and diamond hands. The final insult came in a series of text messages between Marcus and our younger sister Jennifer, who was finishing her sophomore year at Arizona State. Marcus had been trying to convince her to take out student loans so he could invest that money too, promising to pay her back double when his cryptocurrency mooned. Jennifer, thankfully, had been smart enough to refuse, but the messages showed Marcus becoming increasingly desperate and aggressive when she wouldn't cooperate. He'd called her small-minded and financially illiterate, accusing her of not understanding generational wealth building. Reading those messages, I realized this wasn't just about my car anymore. Marcus had developed a full-blown gambling addiction wrapped in entrepreneurial delusion, and he was systematically targeting every family member who might have access to money. My phone rang, a video call from Jennifer. I accepted, and her worried face filled the screen. "Sin, God thanks. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you about Marcus without sounding like I'm starting family drama." "Tell me what you know." Jennifer glanced around her dorm room, then leaned closer to the camera. "He's been acting crazy for months. Ever since he started hanging out with this Derek guy, always talking about cryptocurrency and passive income and how everyone else is stuck in the rat race. What else? He borrowed money from mom and dad last month, told them it was for a certification program that would help him get a better job at the gym. They gave him $3,000. My hands tightened around the phone. Let me guess, that went into cryptocurrency too. But Sen, there's more. He's been telling people around town that you're his business partner, that you're sending him money from deployment to invest in international opportunities. I heard it from 3 different people at the grocery store. The scope of his lies was expanding. Not only had he stolen from me, but he was using my military service and deployment as props in his fantasy narrative about being a successful investor. Has he asked you for money again since you turned him down? Jennifer nodded grimly. 2 days ago. He said he had inside information about some new coin launch and needed $5,000 to secure our family's position. When I said no, he got really angry, started screaming about how I would going to regret missing this opportunity. What kind of angry? Scary angry. He punched a hole in mom and dad's garage wall. Then he left and didn't come home for 2 days. Mom was worried sick. I processed this information, feeling the familiar weight of being the responsible older sibling, the one everyone turned to when Marcus inevitably created chaos. But this time was different. This time, he'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Jen, I need you to do something for me. Anything. Don't give Marcus any money, no matter what story he tells you. Don't co-sign anything, don't let him use your credit, nothing. And if he gets aggressive again, call the police. Is something wrong? You sound different. I looked around the tent, at my fellow soldiers going about their evening routines, oblivious to the family drama playing out on my phone screen. How could I explain that my brother had sold my car and blown the money on cryptocurrency without sounding like a Jerry Springer episode? He sold my Challenger while I was deployed, forged documents to do it, lost all the money gambling. Jennifer's face went pale. Oh my God, Sin, I'm so sorry. That car meant everything to you. It's not just about the car anymore. He's spiraling, and he's going to drag the whole family down with him if someone doesn't stop it. What are you going to do? I thought about Patricia's email, about the evidence we'd already compiled, about the various legal and financial options available to someone who owned the dealership where the fraudulent transaction had taken place. I'm going to help him learn about consequences. After ending the call with Jennifer, I sat in the growing darkness of the Afghan evening, sorting through everything I'd learned. Marcus wasn't just a brother who'd made a mistake. He was a fraud artist who'd systematically targeted his own family, used my military service as a prop in his scams, and shown zero remorse for any of it. My phone buzzed with another text from him. Sin, I know you're mad, but I found another investment opportunity. There's this new NFT project that Derek's cousin is involved in. If we can just get 30,000 together, we could be looking at millions by Christmas. Derek, who had vanished after losing all his money. Derek, whose existence I was beginning to doubt. Derek, who was apparently now a convenient explanation for every new scheme Marcus wanted to pursue. I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Patricia with a note. Add this to the file. Target is now soliciting additional funds for NFT fraud. Her response was immediate. Legal team standing by. How do you want to proceed? I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about loyalty and family and the difference between helping someone and enabling them. Marcus had made his choices. He'd chosen to steal from me, lie to our parents, forge federal documents, and threaten our sister when she wouldn't fund his delusions. Now it was time for him to face the consequences of those choices. But I wasn't going to just destroy him. That would be too simple, too clean. Marcus needed to understand exactly how much damage he'd done and exactly how little he understood about the world he thought he was conquering. He wanted to play entrepreneur? Perfect. It was time to show him what real business looked like. The beauty of military training is that it teaches you to think systematically under pressure. While Marcus was busy sending me increasingly desperate messages about NFT opportunities and diamond hands, I was methodically building a case that would reshape his understanding of accountability. Patricia had connected me with her legal team via a secure video conference. Attorney Sarah Williams specialized in white-collar fraud, while her partner David Kim handled corporate law. Both had military backgrounds and understood the unique aspects of crimes committed against deployed service members. The federal charges alone could put him away for 5 to 7 years, Sarah explained, her face serious on the encrypted call. Identity theft, wire fraud, forgery of government documents, mail fraud if he used postal services for any of the fake paperwork. The military angle makes it worse. Targeting a deployed soldier carries enhanced penalties. But, David interjected, going straight to federal prosecution might not give you the outcome you're looking for. Sometimes the most effective justice is more educational. That's when they outlined what they called the corporate accountability track. Instead of immediately pressing criminal charges, we would use my ownership position at Desert Sun Motors to create a comprehensive learning experience for Marcus. He would discover, step by step, exactly how real business worked and exactly how much trouble he was actually in. The first phase was already in motion. Patricia had instructed Jimmy Rodriguez to freeze any paperwork related to the Challenger sale, citing irregularities in the documentation. From Marcus's perspective, it would look like routine administrative delays. From my perspective, it was buying time to set up the perfect trap. Phase 2 required some creative accounting. Using my access to the dealership's financial systems, we identified every fraudulent element of Marcus's transaction and began building a paper trail that would make his crimes impossible to deny. The forged power of attorney, the falsified military documents, the fake medical emergency story, everything was meticulously documented with timestamps, security camera footage, and witness statements. But the real genius was Phase 3. David had discovered that Marcus had been telling people around Phoenix that he was a vehicle acquisition specialist working with military personnel overseas. He'd even created business cards and a LinkedIn profile describing his international automotive consulting services. Several people had approached him about selling their own cars, believing he had special connections to overseas buyers who paid premium prices. He's building a fraudulent business based on the success of your car sale, David explained. We can use that. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would let Marcus believe his scheme was working, encourage him to expand it, and then systematically dismantle every lie he'd built his new identity around. But first, we needed to draw him deeper into the web. I crafted a carefully worded email to Marcus, sent from a military email address that looked official but was actually routed through Patricia's corporate servers. Specialist Rodriguez, your brother Marcus has been designated as your stateside asset management representative following review of his successful liquidation of your 2018 Challenger. Additional high-value vehicles from deployed personnel require immediate processing. Contact your liaison officer for assignment details. The email included a phone number that connected to David's office, where a paralegal named Miguel would pose as Liaison Officer Thompson from a fictional military asset management program. Marcus called within 2 hours. Miguel, a former Marine himself, delivered the performance of his career. Using authentic military jargon and procedures, he explained that the Department of Defense had identified Marcus as a qualified civilian contractor for vehicle liquidation services. Several other deployed soldiers need their cars sold quickly for operational security reasons, and Marcus's proven track record made him the ideal candidate. The catch? Each vehicle sale required a $5,000 good faith deposit to cover insurance and handling fees, refundable of course, standard government procedure. Marcus was so excited he could barely contain himself. Here was validation that his theft of my car wasn't a crime. It was the beginning of a legitimate government contract. He immediately started calling friends and family, trying to raise the deposit money. Meanwhile, I was coordinating with the real Jimmy Rodriguez, who was both horrified by the fraud committed at his dealership and eager to help catch the perpetrator. Jimmy had agreed to play along with our plan, acting as an unwitting participant who gradually discovered the truth about Marcus's crimes. I feel terrible that this happened on my lot, Jimmy told me during one of our secure calls. Your brother seemed so sincere, so worried about his sister. I never imagined someone would forge military documents like that. You couldn't have known, I assured him. but now we can make sure he never does this to anyone else. The timeline was accelerating. Marcus had managed to borrow $3,000 from our parents, again, by telling them it was for a government certification program that would guarantee him ongoing work with military families. He was frantically trying to raise the remaining $2,000 when Jennifer called me with disturbing news. "He's been asking around about my college fund," she said, her voice worried. "Talking to Mom about how I could invest some of it in his business opportunity. He showed her some fake government website David's team had created, complete with official-looking seals and testimonials." The fictional website was a masterpiece of misdirection. It described the Deployed Personnel Asset Management Program in bureaucratic language that sounded completely authentic. Marcus had been showing it to everyone, using it as proof that his newfound career was legitimate government work. "Mom's actually considering it," Jennifer continued. "She thinks Marcus has finally found his calling, and she wants to support him." This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the point where Marcus's greed would override any remaining caution. He was so convinced he'd stumbled into a golden opportunity that he was willing to risk our parents' savings and Jennifer's education fund. That evening, I received a long, rambling voicemail from Marcus that perfectly captured his delusional state. "Sin, I know you were upset about the car thing, but you're going to thank me when you see how this all plays out. I'm basically the running point for this whole military vehicle program now. The government guy says I have natural talent for it. I'm talking about steady six-figure income here, real wealth building. And the best part? I can help other deployed soldiers too, not just you. I'm thinking about expanding into other military assets, electronics, equipment, whatever families need to liquidate quickly. This could be huge, Sin. Generational wealth type is huge." He paused, and I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice despite his forced enthusiasm. "Look, I just need to come up with a couple more thousand for the certification deposit, and then we're golden. I already talked to Mom about Jennifer's college fund, just temporarily, you know. The returns on this government contract will more than cover her tuition. I'm thinking Harvard, Yale, whatever she wants. That's the kind of money we're talking about here." The voicemail continued for another 3 minutes, with Marcus spinning increasingly elaborate fantasies about the business empire he was going to build on the foundation of defrauding military families. By the end, he was talking about franchising the operation nationally and maybe writing a book about alternative wealth strategies. I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to Sarah Williams with a note. "Subject is now attempting to defraud parents and sister. Please add to the evidence file." Her response was immediate. "Federal prosecutors are going to love this case. How much longer do you want to let him dig the hole?" I looked out at the Afghan landscape, thinking about Marcus sitting in Phoenix, probably refreshing his cryptocurrency portfolio and planning how to spend money he would never actually receive. He thought he was building a business empire. In reality, he was building his own prison. But I wasn't ready to spring the trap yet. Marcus needed to understand the full weight of what he'd done, and he needed to do it in front of everyone who'd enabled his delusions. It was time for Phase 4, bringing this whole operation home. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in Patricia Chen's downtown Phoenix office, jet-lagged but focused. Emergency leave had been approved faster than usual. Apparently, identity theft and fraud targeting deployed personnel got the Army's attention in ways that family emergencies typically didn't. The office overlooked the valley, glass and steel reflecting the Arizona sun. Patricia had prepared everything meticulously. The conference room table held neat stacks of evidence, bank records, security footage, forensic analysis of the forged documents, screenshots of Marcus's social media boasting, and recorded phone calls from his attempts to recruit more investors for his fictional government contracting business. "He's expecting to meet Liaison Officer Thompson here at 3 p.m., Patricia said, checking her watch. "Miguel's been stringing him along for 2 weeks about this big contract signing. Marcus thinks he's about to become the Southwest Regional Coordinator for military vehicle liquidation." David Kim pulled up Marcus's latest Instagram posts on the large screen. The past few days had been a masterclass in premature celebration. Photos of Marcus at a suit store, captioned, "Dressing for Success, Government Contractor Reading Today." A video of him practicing his signature for all the contracts I'm about to sign. A selfie from the parking garage downstairs with, "About to change my family's life forever, #entrepreneur." He borrowed another $2,000 from your parents yesterday, Sarah reported, sliding a bank statement across the table. Told them it was for a security clearance background check fee. They refinanced their house to get him the money. My parents had put their home at risk to fund Marcus's delusions. The house I'd grown up in, where they'd planned to live out their retirement, was now collateral for his cryptocurrency losses and fake business ventures. "There's more," Patricia said quietly. "Show her the Jennifer situation." David switched to a different file. Phone records showed that Marcus had been calling Jennifer 15 times a day for the past week. Text message logs revealed an escalating pattern of manipulation and threats. "She finally blocked his number yesterday," Sarah explained, "but not before he told her entire sorority that she was sabotaging her family's financial future by refusing to liquidate her college fund. Several of her friends have been asking her why she won't help her brother's government business." Marcus had turned my sister's social circle against her, using his fake success story to make her look selfish and small-minded. Jennifer now deals with peer pressure and social embarrassment because she'd been smart enough not to fund his fraud. At 2:45 p.m., building security called. Marcus had arrived early, wearing an ill-fitting suit and carrying a leather briefcase that still had the price tag attached. The security cameras showed him pacing the lobby, occasionally stopping to take selfies with the building directory in the background. "Positions, everyone," Patricia said. The plan was surgical. Marcus would be brought to the conference room expecting to meet his government contact. Instead, he'd find me, our parents, Jennifer, Jimmy Rodriguez, and the legal team. Everything would be recorded. Every lie he'd told would be systematically dismantled. And then, he'd have to choose between federal prison and a very different kind of accountability. Miguel called from the lobby. Liaison Officer Thompson had supposedly been delayed, but had sent Marcus up to finalize the paperwork with his assistant. Standard government efficiency, Miguel explained. Marcus was so excited he practically ran to the elevator. I heard his footsteps in the hallway, confident and quick. The conference room door opened. "Oh, wow, this is a nice setup," Marcus said. "Very professional. Where's Officer Thompson?" "Sit down, Marcus." He spun around, his face going through a series of expressions as his brain tried to process what he was seeing. Confusion first, then recognition, then a forced smile as he shifted into damage control mode. "Sen, what are you doing here? I thought you were still deployed. This is perfect timing. You can meet Officer Thompson and see what I've been working on. Wait until you hear about the expansion opportunities." "Sit down." Something in my tone must have registered because his smile faltered. He noticed our parents sitting stiffly at the far end of the table, Jennifer's tear-stained face, Jimmy Rodriguez looking uncomfortable in his Sunday best. "What's going on? Why is everyone here?" "There is no Officer Thompson. There is no military vehicle liquidation program. There is no government contract." Marcus laughed, but it sounded hollow. "What are you talking about? I've been working with the Department of Defense for weeks. I have emails, documentation, everything." Patricia stood up and walked to the screen, pulling up the fake website David's team had created. "This website? We built it. The phone number you've been calling? Our office. The official-looking documents? Generated by our legal team to document your willingness to defraud the federal government." The color drained from Marcus's face. "That's impossible. I talked to Officer Thompson myself, multiple times." Miguel stepped into the room, still wearing his military uniform from his paralegal job. "That was me, Marcus. Marine veteran, law degree, very good at sounding official." Marcus sat down heavily, his briefcase falling to the floor. "I don't understand." "Let me help you understand," I said, pulling out the first stack of documents. "You forged federal documents to steal my car. You impersonated a military family member to commit fraud. You used my deployment as a prop in your scam. You've attempted to defraud our parents, our sister, and multiple other people using a fictional government business. It wasn't fraud, Marcus protested weakly. I was trying to help. The car was just sitting there and you needed the money. I didn't need the money, I interrupted. I needed my car. The car I worked 3 years to afford. The car you had no right to touch. Mom finally spoke up, her voice shaky. Marcus, honey, what happened to the money from Cynthia's car? Marcus looked around the room desperately, like he was searching for an escape route. It's invested. It's growing. I explained this already. Sarah Williams opened her laptop and turned it toward him. Moon Diamond cryptocurrency, purchased at 63 cents per coin, current value less than 1 cent. Your sister's $68,000 is now worth approximately $400. It'll come back, Marcus said, but his voice cracked. These markets are volatile. You have to think long-term. Jennifer leaned forward, anger overriding her tears. What about my college fund? What about Mom and Dad's house? Were you thinking long-term when you tried to steal from all of us? I wasn't stealing. I was building wealth for the whole family. By lying to everyone, Dad said quietly. He looked older than when I'd left for deployment, gray around the edges that hadn't been there before. By forging documents, by making us risk our home. Marcus's confident facade was crumbling. You don't understand how investing works. You don't understand cryptocurrency or business or… I understand fraud, I said, pulling out the criminal complaint Sarah had prepared. I understand identity theft. I understand the difference between investing and gambling with stolen money. Jimmy Rodriguez spoke for the first time since I'd entered the room. Son, you made me an accessory to federal crimes. My dealership's reputation, my relationship with the military community, everything I've built over 30 years, you put all of that at risk with your lies. Marcus stared at the table, finally beginning to grasp the scope of what he'd done. The fake confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like the brother I'd grown up with. What do you want? He asked quietly. I opened the final folder. You have 2 choices. Option 1. We file criminal charges. Federal prosecutors are very interested in your case. You'll be looking at 5 to 7 years minimum, and our family will spend the next decade dealing with the legal and financial consequences of your decisions. Or, option 2, you take responsibility, full responsibility, in front of everyone you've lied to, everyone you've stolen from, everyone you've used. Marcus looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. What does that mean exactly? I slid the comprehensive restitution plan across the table. It means you pay back every penny. It means you get a real job and work real hours for real money. It means you apologize to every person you've defrauded, and you do it publicly. It means you attend financial counseling and gambling addiction treatment, and it means you never, ever use our family as props in your schemes again. He picked up the document with shaking hands, his eyes widening as he read the terms. This is everything I have, more than everything. Yes, I said simply. That's what consequences look like. The room fell silent, except for the air conditioning and the distant sound of Phoenix traffic. Marcus sat there holding his future in his hands, finally understanding that actions have prices, and his bill had come due in full. Marcus signed the restitution agreement, but his compliance lasted exactly 48 hours. I was staying at a hotel near the base, planning to fly back to complete my deployment, when Jennifer called at 2 a.m., sobbing. He's gone crazy, Sin. I completely lost it. Through her tears, the story emerged. Marcus had left the meeting in Patricia's office, seemingly defeated, but by the next morning, he'd convinced himself that the entire confrontation was part of some elaborate conspiracy against him. The Facebook posts started around noon. My own family set me up, he'd written, used fake lawyers and fake government officials to try to steal my business opportunities. This is what jealousy looks like when someone tries to break free from the poverty mindset. The post had gotten worse from there, spiraling into increasingly paranoid rants about how I was working with corporate interests to sabotage his cryptocurrency investments and steal his intellectual property. He'd tagged our entire extended family, several of his former friends, and even my commanding officer, whose information he'd found online. But that's not the worst part, Jennifer continued. He went to Desert Sun Motors this afternoon. My blood ran cold. What did he do? Jimmy Rodriguez called Dad around 6. Marcus showed up demanding his commission for the Challenger sale. When Jimmy tried to explain that the whole transaction was fraudulent, Marcus started screaming about breach of contract and threatened to sue the dealership. I was already reaching for my clothes. Is Jimmy okay? Physically, yes, but Marcus made a huge scene in front of customers. He was live streaming the whole thing on Instagram, talking about exposing corrupt businesses and standing up to the system. Jimmy had to call the police. The live stream was still up when I checked Marcus's Instagram account. 23 minutes of him ranting in the Desert Sun Motor showroom, occasionally pointing his phone at Jimmy Rodriguez and accusing him of being part of a family conspiracy. The comment section was a mixture of confused relatives asking what was happening and strangers encouraging Marcus to fight the power. But the most disturbing part was the end of the video. As police officers entered the frame, Marcus had looked directly into the camera and said, "If anything happens to me, it's because I knew too much about my sister's military connections. Follow the money, people. Follow the money." He'd managed to turn his own fraud into a conspiracy theory starring himself as the victim. The police report that Jimmy faxed to Patricia's office painted a picture of complete disconnect from reality. Marcus had refused to leave the dealership, claiming he had legal documentation proving his right to be there. When officers asked to see the documentation, he'd showed them printouts of his own Instagram posts about the fake government contract. He'd been arrested for trespassing and disturbing the peace, but released on his own recognizance after our parents posted bail money they'd borrowed against Dad's pension. That's when things escalated beyond family drama into genuine danger. David Kim called me at 6 a.m. with news that made my deployment stress seem manageable by comparison. Marcus had retained a lawyer, specifically Richard Garrett, a strip mall attorney known for taking cases too frivolous for legitimate firms. Garrett filed papers claiming the Desert Sun Motors transaction was valid and demanding immediate payment of Marcus's sales commission, David explained. But that's not the concerning part. What's the concerning part? He's also filed a restraining order petition against you, claiming you've been using your military position to harass and intimidate him. The petition includes screenshots of your deployment location, your unit information, and claims that you've been making threatening phone calls using government equipment. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for the following afternoon. If granted, it would not only restrict my contact with Marcus, but could also trigger a military investigation into the misuse of government resources. My commanding officer would receive official notification, potentially derailing my career and my planned transition to civilian business ownership. Marcus had weaponized the legal system against me using the same military service he'd stolen from. But Richard Garrett had made a critical error. In his eagerness to file dramatic legal motions, he'd failed to research the basic facts of the case. He didn't know about my ownership of Desert Sun Motors. He didn't know about the comprehensive evidence Patricia's team had compiled. And he certainly didn't know that Sarah Williams had been quietly coordinating with federal prosecutors who were increasingly interested in Marcus's expanding pattern of fraud. "How do you want to handle the hearing?" Sarah asked during our emergency conference call. I thought about Marcus, probably sitting in Garrett's office right now, spinning new stories about military conspiracies and corrupt businesses. I thought about our parents, depleting their retirement savings to enable his delusions. I thought about Jennifer, afraid to answer her phone because Marcus had started calling her friends and professors, trying to convince them she was part of the family conspiracy against him. "We go nuclear," I said. "Full disclosure, everything we have." "That means criminal charges," Patricia warned. Once we put federal fraud on the table in open court, there's no walking it back. Good. He's had multiple chances to take responsibility. Instead, he's chosen to double down and drag everyone else through the mud with him. The hearing was held in a cramped courtroom that smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Marcus arrived wearing the same ill-fitting suit from our confrontation, accompanied by Richard Garrett, who looked exactly like Central Casting's idea of a sleazy lawyer: shiny tie, too much cologne, and a briefcase covered in motivational stickers. Our side of the courtroom looked like a corporate board meeting. Sarah Williams in her Navy Armani suit, David Kim with his stack of meticulously organized evidence binders, Patricia Chen taking notes on her tablet, and Jimmy Rodriguez sitting quietly in the gallery, still wearing his Desert Sun Motors polo shirt. Judge Maria Santos called the hearing to order, and Garrett immediately launched into his prepared speech about military overreach and family intimidation. He painted Marcus as a successful entrepreneur being targeted by powerful interests who couldn't tolerate his independence and innovation. Your Honor, my client has built a legitimate business providing vehicle liquidation services to military families. His own sister, using her position in the Army, has orchestrated a campaign of harassment designed to destroy his livelihood. Marcus nodded along enthusiastically, occasionally whispering corrections in Garrett's ear. Mr. Rodriguez has attempted to interfere with lawful business transactions, and we have evidence that government personnel have been used to intimidate witnesses and suppress evidence of my client's legitimate contracts. Judge Santos looked skeptical but allowed Garrett to continue his presentation. Marcus had provided what he claimed were phone records showing suspicious calls from military numbers, screenshots of his Instagram posts as evidence of his business success, and a handwritten timeline of the alleged harassment campaign. When Garrett finished, Judge Santos turned to our table. Miss Williams? Sarah stood up slowly, radiating the kind of calm confidence that comes from having an overwhelming amount of evidence. Your Honor, the petitioner's claims are not merely false. They are part of an ongoing pattern of fraud that includes identity theft, forgery of federal documents, and wire fraud targeting deployed military personnel. She opened her first binder. We have security camera footage of Mr. Marcus Rodriguez using forged military documents to fraudulently sell a vehicle belonging to his deployed sister. We have bank records showing he immediately gambled away the proceeds. We have recorded phone calls of him attempting to defraud additional family members using fictitious government contracts. Garrett started to object, but Judge Santos held up her hand. We also have evidence that Mr. Rodriguez has been impersonating a federal contractor, collecting money from victims who believe they're participating in legitimate government programs. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has been notified and is prepared to file charges. The blood drained from Marcus's face. Across the aisle, I could see him whispering frantically to Garrett, who was frantically flipping through his notes as if looking for some magic argument that would make federal fraud charges disappear. Furthermore, Sarah continued, the complainant's claims about military harassment are demonstrably false. The phone calls he's referencing were made by licensed attorneys investigating crimes committed against their client. The intimidation he described was a legitimate business meeting where he was offered the opportunity to make restitution rather than face criminal prosecution. She slid a thick folder across to the court clerk. Your Honor, included in our response are federal criminal referral letters, forensic analysis of the forged documents, and a complete timeline of the defendant's fraudulent activities. We're requesting that this frivolous restraining order petition be dismissed and that the court refer this matter to the appropriate federal authorities. Judge Santos spent 10 minutes reviewing the evidence in silence. When she finally looked up, her expression was grim. Mr. Garrett, does your client have any response to these allegations? Marcus started to stand, but Garrett pulled him back down. They huddled for a whispered conference that grew increasingly heated as Marcus apparently demanded to speak for himself. Finally, Garrett stood up. Your Honor, we request a continuance to review this new information. Motion denied. Mr. Rodriguez, you have 30 seconds to explain why federal prosecutors shouldn't be reviewing your case right now. Marcus shot to his feet, ignoring Garrett's attempts to stop him. This is all lies. They made fake evidence to frame me. My sister owns that dealership. It's all a setup. The courtroom fell completely silent. Judge Santos raised an eyebrow. Your sister owns Desert Sun Motors? Yes, she's been planning this whole thing. She owns the dealership, and she used it to frame me. Sarah Williams smiled for the first time all day. Your Honor, the defendant just confessed to knowingly defrauding a business owned by his sister, which elevates this from simple fraud to interstate theft targeting military personnel. Marcus realized what he'd just said, but it was too late. In his desperation to prove a conspiracy, he admitted to the one fact that transformed his case from a state misdemeanor to a federal felony. Judge Santos closed her folder with a sharp snap. Restraining order petition dismissed. Bailiff, please escort Mr. Rodriguez to the holding. Federal marshals will be here within the hour. As Marcus was led away in handcuffs, still shouting about conspiracies and family betrayal, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this whole ordeal began: relief. Not because my brother was going to jail, but because he'd finally run out of people to blame and stories to tell. Reality had caught up with Marcus Rodriguez, and there was nowhere left for him to run. The federal courthouse in Phoenix was a different world from the cramped state courtroom where Marcus had confessed to his crimes. Here, everything moved with the methodical precision of a system that didn't tolerate fraud against military personnel. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez was exactly the kind of prosecutor Marcus should have been terrified to face. Former Marine, Harvard Law, with a conviction rate that made defense attorneys recommend plea deals before she even opened case files. She'd taken one look at Marcus's evidence file and immediately elevated his case to her personal caseload. 19 federal charges, she explained to me during our pretrial meeting: identity theft, wire fraud, mail fraud, computer fraud, impersonating a federal official, and my personal favorite, aggravated identity theft with a military enhancement. That last one alone carries a mandatory 2-year sentence. Marcus's new lawyer was a significant upgrade from Richard Garrett. Thomas Chen, no relation to Patricia, was a respected federal defender who specialized in white-collar cases. But even he seemed overwhelmed by the scope of his client's documented crimes. Your brother created a perfect storm, Thomas explained during a settlement conference. He committed federal crimes, confessed to them in open court, and did it all while targeting military families. Federal judges don't show mercy for this kind of case. The evidence presentation took 3 days. Sarah Williams had assembled everything into a chronological narrative that read like a textbook case study in how fraud escalates when consequences are ignored. Day 1 covered the original car theft, complete with security footage of Marcus forging documents, Jimmy Rodriguez's testimony about the fake medical emergency story, and forensic analysis of the falsified military paperwork. The jury watched Marcus lie with the confidence of someone who'd never been held accountable for anything. Day 2 focused on cryptocurrency gambling and the systematic targeting of family members. Jennifer testified about the pressure campaign, our parents described the loans they couldn't afford, and financial experts explained how Marcus had lost $68,000 in a matter of weeks on obvious scam investments. But Day 3 was when the case became something larger than just family fraud. AUSA Martinez had subpoenaed Marcus's complete digital footprint, and what they found was a network of attempted scams that extended far beyond our family. Over the past 6 months, Marcus had contacted 47 different military families, claiming to represent various government asset liquidation programs. 3 families had actually sent him money before discovering the programs didn't exist. The defendant didn't just steal from his sister, Martinez told the jury during closing arguments. He systematically targeted military families across 3 states, using their service and sacrifice as tools in his fraudulent schemes. This isn't family drama. This is predatory behavior against our nation's defenders. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all 19 counts. Marcus stood frozen as the verdicts were read, his face cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally, something that might have been recognition of reality. Thomas Chen had prepared him for this outcome, but hearing guilty 19 times in a row apparently still came as a shock. Judge William Harrison scheduled sentencing for the following month, remanding Marcus to federal custody without bail. As the marshals led him away, he looked back at our family sitting in the gallery. For a moment, I thought he might finally say something that resembled an apology. Instead, he shouted, "This isn't over. You'll see what happens when you destroy a family." Even facing federal prison, Marcus was still casting himself as the victim. The weeks between conviction and sentencing were strange. Our parents entered family counseling to understand how they'd enabled Marcus's behavior for so long. Jennifer returned to college with a newfound confidence, no longer apologizing for refusing to fund delusion. And I completed my deployment, flying home to begin the business transition that had been derailed by Marcus's crimes. Patricia had kept Desert Sun Motors running smoothly during the legal proceedings. Jimmy Rodriguez had used the publicity from the case to position the dealership as a military-friendly business that protected service members from fraud. Ironically, Marcus's crimes had actually strengthened the business he'd tried to exploit. "We've had 12 military families transfer their service here from other dealerships," Jimmy reported during our monthly meeting. "Apparently, word spread that we take fraud seriously and protect our customers." The sentencing hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in November. The courtroom was packed. Federal fraud sentencing for crimes against military families drew attention from victim advocacy groups, military support organizations, and local media covering the conclusion of what had become known as the deployed sister fraud case. Marcus entered wearing an orange jumpsuit, his previous confidence completely gone. 2 months in federal holding had apparently provided some clarity about his situation. Thomas Chen had negotiated the best deal possible under the circumstances: full restitution, 5 years federal prison, 3 years supervised probation, and forfeiture of any assets connected to the fraudulent schemes. "Before I impose sentence," Judge Harrison said, "I'll hear victim impact statements." I had prepared remarks, but looking at Marcus across the courtroom, hollow-eyed, defeated, finally understanding the weight of consequences, I felt something unexpected: sadness. Not for his situation, which he'd created entirely through his own choices, but for the waste of it all. The intelligence he'd used to forge documents could have been applied to legitimate business. The charm he'd used to manipulate people could have built real relationships. The energy he'd spent on cryptocurrency gambling could have created actual value. "Your Honor," I said, standing at the podium, "my brother stole more than just my car. He stole my trust, my family's financial security, and the peace of mind of military families who trusted him. But the thing he stole that I'll never get back is the relationship we had before he chose fraud over family." I looked directly at Marcus. "I hope prison gives you time to understand the difference between helping people and using them. Our family will be here when you're ready to rebuild those relationships honestly." Our parents spoke next, describing the financial hardship and emotional trauma Marcus's lies had caused. Dad's voice broke when he talked about refinancing their house to fund what they thought was their son's legitimate business opportunity. Jennifer's statement was the most powerful. "My brother taught me that love without boundaries isn't actually love, it's enabling. I learned to say no to him, and that skill has made me stronger in every area of my life. I hope other people in similar situations will learn that protecting yourself from someone's destructive behavior isn't betrayal, it's necessary." Finally, Jimmy Rodriguez spoke on behalf of the military families Marcus had targeted. This defendant didn't just commit fraud, he attacked the trust that holds military communities together. He used our respect for service members as a weapon against service members. That's not just criminal behavior, it's a betrayal of fundamental American values. Judge Harrison reviewed the sentencing guidelines for several minutes before speaking. "Mr. Rodriguez, you systematically targeted military families with sophisticated fraud schemes. You stole from your own sister while she was serving our country overseas. You forged federal documents, impersonated government officials, and when confronted with your crimes, you attempted to weaponize the legal system against your victims." He paused, looking directly at Marcus. "However, I also note that this appears to be your first federal conviction. You've expressed remorse to the probation officer, and your family has indicated willingness to support your rehabilitation." Thomas Chen straightened hopefully. Therefore, the court sentences you to 63 months federal incarceration, followed by 36 months supervised probation. You will pay full restitution in the amount of $112,000, including interest and penalties. You will surrender all assets connected to your fraudulent activities, and you are permanently barred from any business involving military personnel or veterans. 5 years and 3 months. It was actually less than the maximum Marcus could have received, but more than enough time for him to understand the price of his choices. As the marshals prepared to escort him back to holding, Marcus looked back at our family one more time. This time, there was no defiance, no conspiracy theories, no victim narratives, just a young man who'd finally run out of excuses and stories to tell. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the courtroom noise. It wasn't enough to repair the damage he'd caused, but it was the first honest thing I'd heard him say in years. Outside the courthouse, our family stood together in the Arizona sunshine, processing the end of a chapter that had consumed nearly a year of our lives. We had justice, restitution orders, and legal closure. What we didn't have was the brother and son we'd thought we knew. But we had something else, the knowledge that we'd stood up to manipulation, refused to enable destructive behavior, and proven that actions have consequences even when family is involved. That night, I drove my replacement Challenger, a 2024 model I'd purchased through Desert Sun Motors, down the same Phoenix highways I'd dreamed of during my deployment. The car was faster than my original, the sound system was better, and the color was perfect. But more importantly, I'd bought it with money I'd earned through legitimate business ownership, not through enabling someone else's delusions. Sometimes, justice isn't just about punishment. It's about proving that honest work and real accountability create better outcomes than fraud and manipulation. Marcus would have 5 years to think about that distinction, and for the first time in our lives, there would be real consequences for forgetting it. 2 years later, I was standing in the Desert Sun Motors showroom watching a young Marine named Tyler Williams sign the paperwork for his first new car purchase. His parents had driven down from Flagstaff to witness the moment, just like mine had done for me 6 years earlier. "Ma'am," Tyler said, his voice still carrying that formal military precision, "my deployment advisor mentioned you have a special program for military personnel." I smiled, thinking about how much had changed since my own first car purchase. "We do. No down payment for active duty, extended warranties at cost, and most importantly, military-specific protections against fraud and unauthorized transactions." The program had been Patricia's idea, implemented after Marcus's case drew national attention to fraud targeting deployed service members. We now required multiple layers of authorization for any vehicle transactions involving military families, maintained escrow accounts for deployed personnel, and provided free legal consultation for any suspicious activity. "Fraud protection is real," Jimmy Rodriguez added, joining our conversation. At 72, he was officially retired, but still came in most days to mentor young buyers and share stories about the business he'd built over 4 decades. Tyler's father, a Vietnam veteran himself, nodded approvingly. "Son, you found the right place. This kind of protection didn't exist when I was serving." As Tyler and his family completed their transaction, I reflected on the path that had brought me here. The business ownership that had started as a secret investment had become the foundation for everything I was building. Desert Sun Motors was now the largest military-focused dealership in Arizona, with partnerships across 3 states and a waiting list of investors wanting to replicate our model. More importantly, we'd become a case study in how businesses could protect vulnerable populations while remaining profitable. Harvard Business School had sent students to interview our team. Military journals featured our fraud prevention protocols, and the Federal Trade Commission had adapted several of our procedures for national military family protection guidelines. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer, now in her senior year at Arizona State with a double major in business and criminal justice. "Lunch today? I have news about the internship." Jennifer had thrived in the aftermath of Marcus's conviction. The experience of standing up to manipulation had given her confidence that transformed every aspect of her life. She'd become a peer counselor for students dealing with family financial abuse, started a campus organization focused on financial literacy, and was already planning law school with a focus on white-collar crime prosecution. We met at a small cafe near campus, the same place where I'd told her about Marcus's crimes 3 years earlier. The contrast was striking. Then, she'd been scared and confused about family loyalty versus self-protection. Now, she radiated the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you can handle whatever comes her way. The FBI internship came through, she announced, practically glowing with excitement. Financial Crimes Division, starting this summer. My supervisor said they specifically wanted someone with real-world exposure to family fraud cases. That's incredible, Jen. You've earned this. I keep thinking about what Marcus said in his first letter from prison, she continued, stirring her coffee thoughtfully, about how he never meant to hurt anyone, how he just got caught up in the excitement of potential wealth. Marcus had been writing to us regularly from federal prison in Colorado. The letters had evolved over time, from initial anger and blame to gradual acceptance of responsibility. His most recent correspondence had included detailed apologies to each family member and a plan for making amends that extended far beyond the court-ordered restitution. "Do you believe him?" I asked. Jennifer considered this carefully. "I believe he believes it, but I also think he still doesn't fully understand the difference between intentions and impact. He's focused on how he felt when he was committing the crimes, not on how his victims felt when they discovered them." That afternoon, I drove out to the state prison where our parents were visiting Marcus for their monthly session. The family counseling had evolved into something more structured, a supervised program designed to help families rebuild relationships damaged by financial crimes. Dr. Rachel Morrison, their therapist, had been working with fraud families for over a decade. She'd explained that the healing process was often longer and more complex than anyone expected because financial crimes violate trust in ways that were difficult to repair. "Marcus is making genuine progress," Dr. Morrison had told me during a recent consultation. "But your family is also learning that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, and rebuilding relationships doesn't mean returning to old patterns." That evening, I sat in my home office reviewing the quarterly reports for our expanded business operations. Desert Sun Motors had grown from a single location to a network of 4 dealerships, with plans for 6 more locations over the next 2 years. We employed 43 people, including several military veterans who'd struggled to find civilian careers. The financial success was satisfying, but what mattered more was the impact we were having. Last month alone, we prevented 2 attempted fraud cases involving deployed personnel, helped 3 military families rebuild credit damaged by financial abuse, and provided emergency transportation for a Navy family whose previous dealer had tried to repossess their car during deployment. My laptop chimed with an encrypted email from Patricia Chen, who was now expanding our business model internationally. Military families stationed overseas faced unique vulnerabilities to financial crimes, and several European bases had requested our consultation on protective protocols. "Cynthia," her message read, "the Pentagon wants to discuss implementing our fraud prevention model military-wide. Meeting scheduled for next month. Bring your best presentation materials and prepare to talk about policy at the national level." 6 years ago, I'd been a young soldier, saving every dollar to buy my dream car. 3 years ago, I'd been a deployed service member, dealing with family betrayal and fraud. Now, I was being asked to help protect military families across the globe from the kinds of crimes my brother had committed. The transformation wasn't just professional, it was personal. I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive behavior. I'd discovered that accountability and consequences could coexist with forgiveness and family bonds. And I'd proven that turning pain into purpose could create outcomes more powerful than revenge alone. My phone rang with a call from an unknown Colorado number. Prison calls always came through with that distinctive automated announcement, but I'd learned to accept them when Marcus called. Sin, his voice was different now. Quieter, more thoughtful than the confident hustler who'd stolen my car. "I wanted to tell you about something that happened in my business ethics class here." Marcus was 18 months into his sentence, participating in every educational and rehabilitation program available. His letters had mentioned classes in financial responsibility, business ethics, and something called restorative justice that focused on repairing harm rather than just accepting punishment. We had to write about a business decision we'd made that hurt other people, he continued. I wrote about your car, but also about all the military families I tried to scam. Reading it out loud to the class, it was the first time I really understood what I'd done to people. I listened as he described the program, designed to help white-collar criminals understand the human impact of financial crimes. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Marcus sounded like he was beginning to grasp the difference between being sorry he got caught and being sorry for the harm he'd caused. I know I can't undo what I did, he said, but I want to spend the rest of my life making sure other people don't make the same mistakes. Maybe work with fraud prevention programs when I get out. Turn this experience into something that actually helps people instead of hurting them. After the call ended, I sat quietly in my office, processing the conversation. Marcus still had 3 years left on his sentence, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. The road to rebuilding trust and relationships would be long and uncertain. But for the first time since discovering his crimes, I felt something I hadn't expected: hope. Not naive optimism about easy reconciliation, but realistic hope that people could change, learn, and grow from even their worst mistakes. The next morning, I drove my Challenger to the original Desert Sun Motors location, where Jimmy Rodriguez was training a new sales associate on military customer protocols. The sun was rising over the Sonoran Desert, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with Arizona in the first place. This was my life now, building businesses that protect people, mentoring young professionals, and proving that honest work created better outcomes than shortcuts and schemes. The car I'd lost had been replaced with something better, not just a faster vehicle, but a deeper understanding of what success actually meant. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the foundation for the best things we build afterward. My brother's betrayal had forced me to discover strengths I didn't know I had, create businesses that mattered, and develop relationships based on honesty rather than enabling. Marcus had tried to steal my future to fund his fantasies. Instead, he'd inadvertently taught me that real wealth comes from building something sustainable, protecting something valuable, and earning something honestly. As I walked into the showroom where this whole story had begun, I smiled at the irony. Marcus had sold my car to this dealership for $68,000, then gambled the money away on cryptocurrency dreams. I'd bought the dealership, turned it into a multi-million-dollar operation, and created a legacy that would protect military families for decades to come. Sometimes justice isn't just about punishment, it's about transformation. And sometimes, the best revenge is building a life so successful and meaningful that the original crime becomes just the starting point for something extraordinary. The road ahead was long, filled with opportunities to grow, create, and protect, and I was driving it in style, with purpose, and with the knowledge that I'd earned every mile through honest work and real accountability. That's what winning actually looks like. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.